Um, awesome. So to start off, I'd like to acknowledge that the land that a lot of us are on right now is unceded and unsurrendered ancestral homelands of the Beatuk, and that the island of Newfoundland is the homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beatuk. I would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatsiavut and the Innu of Nitisinaan as the original people of Labrador. This acknowledgement is a commitment that we practice in action, striving for respectful relationships with all the people on Turtle Island. So thank you everyone for coming to the FARR community conversation. Tonight, Shawn O'Hagan will be guiding a conversation between our FARR artists, Kevin Melanson, Nasim Makaremi, and Nicole Travers. While Shawn has some questions prepared for the three artists, please chime in anytime if you have any questions or comments. And to start, I'd like to introduce each of our artists. And I'll start with Shawn O'Hagan, our moderator. And Shawn just so happens to have also been a FARR artist last year in 2020. So Shawn was born in Toronto and moved to Newfoundland in 1975. She lives and works on the west coast of the island, dividing her time between her house in Corner Brook and her cabin in the Bay of Islands. She has a BFA from the University of Guelph, a BEd in art from the University of Toronto, and an MFA from the University of Waterloo. She has worked with many processes and materials, and for the past 15 years has concentrated mostly on textiles. She's exhibited her work in solo and group shows, mostly in the Maritimes. Her work can be found in many collections, including Canada Council Art Bank. Kevin Melanson is an artist who grew up in the Maritimes and has been living in St. John's, Newfoundland for the past 2 years. He has earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Mount Allison University, and he loves feeding ducks and pigeons. Nasim Makaremi, sorry about that. Nasim, am I saying that right? Is that how you say it?
Yes, you say good, Makaremi.
Okay, cool. Nasim Makaremi is an artist living in St. John's, Newfoundland. Her artwork deals with themes of sexuality, women's experiences, and censorship. Nasim's graduated with a master's in solid state physics and has been painting and making artwork for 15 years. She's shown work in group exhibitions and has studied under several painting and drawing professors. So Nasim is a master scientist, basically, just to make that distinction. And then the last bio I'm going to read is Nicole. So born and raised in Little Port, Elmastukwek, Ktaqmkuk, that's the Bay of Islands of Newfoundland. Nicole Travers is a Mi'kmaq artist creating a multitude of inspiring pieces. Nicole draws inspiration from old style beadwork found in museums, hieroglyphs and petroglyphs. Nicole marries historical styles of beadwork with modern day techniques into contemporary forms. And most recently, she's begun to tan various animal pelts and skins into leather using traditional teachings, and has started to utilize home tanned fish skins into her art, creating sought after unique pieces. And they're beautiful works. So Nicole's fish leather tutorial is up on our website, and so is a recording of Kevin's artist talk, as well as an artist talk from Nasim. So I recommend you checking all of those out. They've been really well received. And with all of that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand it over to our wonderful Shawn O'Hagan to take it away.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm just honored, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know the three artists that we're meeting tonight, even if it was just virtually. I hope that everybody who's watching and participating had a chance to have a look at their artwork before, but if not, as Charlotte said, go on to the Eastern Edge website and have a look. And yeah, you'll be amazed at what they're doing. Now, again, as Charlotte said, I was part of the first group of 6 artists to participate in the FARR residency last year. When COVID happened a year ago, we were all caught off guard, and I think we were brought to a standstill because we didn't know how to react to what we didn't know was happening. And for me, and for many artists, it was, how do I make art in this period? And FARR came around just at the right time because it gave the 6 of us some direction, and it gave us a feeling of community. And FARR stands for flexible, adaptable, remote, and responsive. And when I signed up for a remote residency, I had no idea what this was going to be, and it was exactly what I needed. So I'm just so happy that it is continuing, that these 3 artists have had this experience, and it will happen again and again and again. And it's something that I think really draws Newfoundland artists together. I met with our 3 artists, Nasim, Kevin, and Nicole, a few weeks ago, and we talked about what we should talk about and came up with a few questions. And the first one that I would, well, I want to say first how, although you've come from very different backgrounds, I can't get over how many similarities I found in your work, in your passion for what you do, in your excitement about the materials that you use, how you all throw your bodies physically into what you're doing. And I just think that, I don't know if it was a coincidence that the 3 of you were chosen, but you sure go well together. And it made it very easy to come up with questions that I think all of you will want to answer. So the first question I'm going to direct first to Kevin, and then maybe Nasim, and then Nicole, and then we'll just keep switching it around. But I want to know what you are making now, what your work is about, and where did the idea come from, and what materials and processes are you using? So Kevin?
Yeah, so I am actually making a few things right now. Some of them, I don't know if I really consider them art as much as I think they're experiments. But the project that I applied for this residency with is a cross stitch with text that says instructions on how to tie a butcher's knot. And the reason I decided to make that work is because I have been working as a meat cutter for probably over 10 years now. I've been working at Sobeys for almost 14 years, and I've always tried to like separate my Sobeys life from my real life or my art life. But I realized at one point that I just know a lot about things that I've learned from Sobeys, and so maybe those the things I know from Sobeys shouldn't be off limits for my artwork. And so I'm trying to find ways to sort of tie all that together, and at the same time, I'm working on smaller side projects where I'm just experimenting and trying to figure out what comes next. So I actually have a couple of little cross stitches here because I'm really interested in colors and how they can work together in interesting ways. So I think I want to just maybe try to do a few of these grids and experiment with colors. this was all just sort of like in between other things. And I'm also following a pattern for the first time in my entire life. I have never once followed a pattern. So this is going to be just a row house. Whenever it's done, I have the pattern sitting over there. So at the same time that I'm uh, working on what will probably be a body of work with the butcher's knot thing, I'm also experimenting with ways that I can make work in the future. And at the same time, I'm also hoping to learn rug hooking soon so that I can use that for other projects.
Okay, and Nasim?
Hi, first of all, I'm so lucky to be here. I'm an artist originally from Iran, and now I'm living in beautiful St. John's. I work primarily in drawing, textile, and oil paint, and I studied physics, and I think it has a feel. I feel it has a flow and effect on my creative practice and how I look at art. My artworks focus on censorship of women's body, women's feelings, and their life experience. In this project, I try to embroider some special patterns on sanitary pads. And as you know, sanitary pad is a woman's staff. I saw some special patterns that typically used by local women who weave carpet on a loom. And when women weave these kinds of carpet, they recite some local poems. And I think these local poems are very, very emotional.
Lovely. And Nicole?
Hi, thanks. So I've been working on the different processes of tanning fish skins. So I did experiment with some oil tanning and I was really happy with that, how that turned out. It was a much easier process than I had originally expected. I did also experiment with some natural dyes, and natural dyes I found out pretty quickly are a very touchy to work with, especially with hides and skins. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be looking at again down the road. But I did incorporate oil tanning and then using a fabric dye, and I created a really nice red eel skin. I just haven't figured out what I'm going to do with it yet. I was also gifted a moose hide from my sister's hunt this fall, and I saved it until the spring to start working on it. It's a very, very long process of scraping the hide, defleshing the hide, and then letting it dry, making it thinner so that it's workable. And then I smoked it, and I've been waiting. I know that my next step to do that is soaking and then softening it, and then starting the whole drying and then smoking, soaking and softening it. It's a long process. So I have to wait when I have at least 2 or 3 days consecutive at home with decent weather that I can work on it. And I mean, Newfoundland weather, we get a lot of rain, and I'm here on the West Coast and we've had 2 or 3 days of rain, and I don't think it's going to let up anytime soon. The projects that I've been working on, I try to focus on wearable art to make it visible in everyday life. Like I don't feel like I'm dressed unless I have something beaded on. So I'm always wearing beaded earrings. It's a subtle view. A lot of people don't even realize that they're beaded until they really size them up, or it's a subtle representation of who we are and who I am. I want to make it more visible and such a natural presence that when you do see a pair of beaded earrings or fish skin or smoked hide of any sort, that they just go, somebody just says, oh, isn't that nice? And having the petroglyphs and the hieroglyphs incorporated within that, anybody who has had some knowledge as they were growing up, or have researched it, or have obtained education in their later on in their life, would understand and see that and recognize the double curve or the 8-pointed star, or some of the other significant images within our own new culture. So
Excellent. I love how excited you all get when you talk about what you're doing, and that you're all using very traditional techniques, but you're making them so contemporary that your subject matter is absolutely not traditional. And yeah, that's, you're moving it into the future, which is fantastic. I think this question, Nasim, I'll ask you first. Why did you apply to the FARR residency, and how is it going for you? How are you finding it?
Art is my love. I try to do some artistic activities and show my artworks to the world. The first time I came to St. John's, I want to keep in touch with artists, some galleries and people, to share my ideas and my artworks. I applied for FARR program residency, and I never imagined they choose me as a FARR artist. During this time, I worked with EE team, and they are very great and excellent. Working with them was very enjoyable for me. I connected to Charlotte, Daniel, and Anna, and I want to say special thanks to Charlotte for her help anytime. On the other hand, during this residency, I had 3 days Instagram takeover. I felt very good when I earned other people's and artists' feedback about my artworks, and I prepared my first artistic video during this residency. Absolutely, FARR program residency is a great learning experience for me. And now I'm so happy because I think people and artists touch my ideas and my artworks. And I hope it will be a way for my future excited artistic experience.
Okay, excellent. And Nicole?
What made me want to apply? I think it was a multitude of factors. I mean, Alex has been she's here tonight actually. She's been a great support, and she's a dear friend of mine, and she talked very highly of her FARR experience. And it felt just like a natural transition into becoming a more serious artist for myself. And to be able to, I still find it a little bit like, I still consider myself relatively new to beading. It's been almost 6 years. It's been 5.5 years, I absolutely love it. And it was something that I've dreamed of for such a long time to be able to pick up and do. But I want to be able to do more interpretive pieces, and I want to be able to do things that everything inspires me. All of my artwork is inspired, but I want to be able to do something that makes a statement outside of like earrings and medallions and like cuffs or moccasins, or I want to do things that will also make people think, like, okay, what is she saying here? Like, or that representation of how ingrained we are within the land, and how the water and the land affect us, and how we are we are part of it, and it is a part of us, and how we are always going to continue to be that. I want to be able to portray that and portray the emotion and the part of me that goes into every piece. I think that transition, this was such a nice step, and the things that I've done, I probably wouldn't have done, like experimenting with natural dyes and experimenting. I may not have had the time to sit down and actually do some of this and say, well, you know, look, I work a full-time job and I have 2 small children, and some people say, how do you do it all? And honestly, I don't know, but I do somehow. And I want my girls to understand that as they grow up, that this is a beautiful form of expression, and them to be able to be comfortable enough to say, Mom, you know, I want to do this as a full-time career. I don't want to do it as something like you started out as. I want to be able to do this and be my full expression. And I would be my heart would burst with excitement.
That's beautiful. Good. And Kevin?
For me, really what it comes down to is that I hadn't really been making any art for a long time. And I just needed to have a reason to do it. And like I was having a conversation with somebody just yesterday who was saying that she really wants to try to get back into embroidery, and I was saying, well, maybe you should think about applying for the art crawl for the for Holdfast this year, because that way you'll have some sort of deadline. You'll have like you'll need to do it. Like you'll be signed on for something. You'll have a deadline, and you'll do it. And I think that's really just what I needed, is to have some sort of deadline, because the project with the butcher's knot, like it's sort of first iteration in my head was probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I just hadn't done anything with it. And then finally I just said, I'm going to do something with it now. And it was really nice to just have the reason to do it, but also to have the supportive community around, so that I could work on it and talk to people about it. They could tell me what they think about it, so that you know, a lot of times you just get really in your head about it, and you only get the feedback once you have a completed work. But it's nice to get feedback while you're working on it. So yeah, it's the long and short of it is that I just wasn't making work, and I needed to make work. So
I think that that's why this program is so important. I think that that's helped so many people. Well, there are 9 of us now, and whether you were making work and then the pandemic stopped it, or whether you have just graduated from university and you didn't know where to go, and it's such a warm and welcoming embrace, I think. Yeah, a really good program. I was going to ask the next question, and this would be Nicole. First, how has your work changed? How has the pandemic affected your work, and how has your work changed? And I think that you all talked a bit about how your work has changed since you started the program, but we're talking now about a full year, and I just wonder, how has the isolation, how have the lockdowns, how have the restrictions, how has the fear affected your work?
Well, I know for the first 3 or 4 months when we entered into the lockdown last year, I didn't create anything. My beads, my materials were put away. And I don't think mentally I was prepared to be able to take any pieces and turn them into something. I I think honestly, it drained me, and it's still draining me, but at least I'm having a creative output. And I've become completely enamored with quill work. Now, I'm not a quill artist, but I like to take that and turn it into an interpretation of a visual representation of what I think quill work would look like if it was beaded. And it's bright and it's beautiful, and it's something that's the ability to be able to dive into something that is cheerful. To me, I look at it and it's cheerful, it's bright, it's colorful, and it's almost that dark background that with the tea tanning, and then having those bright colors. It's like, hey, we're still here, we're still going. Let's keep going. Everything is going to get better. Just give it some time. And I'm in love with that idea that you know, from the darkness there's always going to be some light. And I think that's the way that I've been turning those pieces, and they've become brighter and very colorful since compared to my earlier work, when even from last year or the year before, just from very simple pieces to more elaborate, taking a lot more time to do one piece.
Yeah. And Nasim, how has the pandemic affected your work?
Past year was very different year for me because of two reasons. The first reason was pandemic that changed the world's condition, and the second was my immigration to St. John's. The 8 months of last year, I was in Iran in isolation, and I had some problems because I wanted to come to St. John's, but I couldn't about COVID-19 limitations. Finally, I came to St. John's in October, and first I had 2 weeks quarantine time. During quarantine time, I was thinking about my artworks, and I was sure my artworks will have changed because of changing my life conditions. The first time when I saw a beautiful and amazing landscape of St. John's, such as Signal Hill, Cape Spear, colorful houses in downtown, I was thinking this amazing environment is full of inspiration for me. When I came to St. John's, I was sure I can do and continue my artworks and show them. Then when I came to St. John's, I acquainted with some new animals like moose, and I tried to use them in my drawings. In the first drawing that I draw it in St. John's, I tried to combine moose with crow because I want to show my feels as a woman. Who want to experience a new life in new country, and I want to combine it with my past culture.
Okay. And Kevin?
Hi. When this pandemic all started, I actually started having to work more than usual because I was working at a grocery store. So while all these people were sort of being laid off and staying home, my hours actually went up. And I was also going to school part-time, studying creative writing at MUN. And I just found myself just so miserable because I was just so busy. And I also, this past year, I've had to move a couple of times, and that just sort of like drains the mental health. And yeah, this past year, I feel like I've had a few ups and downs with what has felt like more downs than ups. And so now that we're sort of coming around the bend, hopefully the final stretch of the pandemic in these parts, we'll see. um, yeah, like I feel like mentally I'm able to actually start to think about the work that I'm doing again in a way that I haven't really been able to in the last little while, um, which is nice. One of the things that I've always sort of liked about embroidery is that I can usually get all the thinking done at the beginning and then just do the doing, which is what takes a long time. So if I just have my idea, I can go ahead and spend 30 or 40 hours on it because I don't really have to think from that point on. I just need to do the project. Um, and yeah, I find that now I'm more able to do the thinking as well as the doing.
Yeah, there's such brightness and hopefulness in all that you say, which is wonderful to hear coming out of our darkness. And I love what you just said about the idea and then the doing. And I think all four of us work that way, that you have to have that time, that quiet moment where the idea can come. And then once you've got that, then you can be doing anything with anybody and still be working and feeling at the end of the day that you've been creative. So I think we've chosen really good jobs. One of the other similarities that I found with your work is that you all in some way refer to language or stories. And I wonder if you could talk about that. Kevin, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I've always had sort of a weird relationship with language. I spent the majority of my life living in New Brunswick, which is a bilingual province. Um, and I spent the first part of my life living in Nova Scotia, which is an English province. And so by the time I got to New Brunswick, it was too late for me to enter French immersion, which I probably would have done. And the core French program in New Brunswick is an absolute joke. And so I sort of spent most of my life living in a province where half the people are speaking French and I didn't. And so I have this sort of weird relationship with language, and I've also just been a huge reader my whole life. My mom used to volunteer at school libraries, so I used to take home books all the time, and so I think language is just something that's just sort of like deeply seated in the work that I do without me even thinking about it. And I know I've had studio visits with artists while I was in school, where every time I would lay out my artwork, which was mostly drawings at that point, they would always say, "I see a relationship between this work and language," and I would be like, "Well, yeah, I like reading a lot. That makes sense. You know, I read a lot of poetry and stuff." And then even one time, I made sure to put out a bunch of artwork that had nothing to do with language. And the artist, who was Mark Klintberg, came in and said, "I see a relationship between this artwork and language," and I never really understood why that was, because I had specifically tried not to have that artwork. Um, so yeah, I think it's just something that's deeply ingrained in me. I have always been a big poetry reader. I love how words can be arranged in different ways. I love comma usage. I'm a comma nerd. Um, and yeah, when I was studying art, one of my big areas of interest was text-based art, even though a lot of the time I wasn't making text-based art. And so this is my first time making text-based art in quite a while, and it feels nice.
And Nicole?
Kevin, it seems like you probably had a very similar experience like myself. You didn't realize there were connections until somebody else pointed them out. And you're just like, hey, I'm just making things. I'm creating things. I'm just letting my mind wander, and I'm letting myself do what it wants to do because it feels good. It feels good with my hands, and it feels good for my mind. And Shawn, I didn't realize until you asked me if storytelling was an important part. And I kind of went, nah, first. And I thought about it and I was like, wait now, it really is. It really is. I always want to, when I like I do a lot of things on Instagram. And it's almost like I've thought about it. I've probably never said this out loud to anybody, but it's almost like my personal journal without my own name. And I express things on there, and it's always in relation to my work and my work at that time and what I'm doing and why I'm creating it and how I have that relationship to it. And I always want to give respect for if something was gifted to me in my work. And I always want to show that relationship that I had with it and it has with me, or what part of me went into creating this. And I feel that it was important to tell and share people that. And I think that's part of me, like unknowingly, it's almost therapeutic. And it's also, it tells people that there is really a part of me in each piece. And and I just want to show the respect for each piece. It's to me, it's a huge part of me. Like some things come to me in dreams, and some things I could be in the middle of a meeting and I'll have an idea come to my head and I'm scratching on my notebook and I'm like, okay, now I've got to put that away until I have the time to go back to it. Or I've woken up in the middle of the night and gone out to get a glass of water and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Yes, let's do this. And yeah, it's so, I really appreciate that you had asked me that question because I wouldn't have put two and two together.
That's what this residency is all about, you know, the sharing of ideas and sharing, impressions and how we all react to one another's work, and it's just priceless. Nasim.
As I mentioned, in my artworks, I focus on some local poems that women recite them when they weave these kinds of carpet. I pay attention to these poems, and there are about most of them. There are about love, and I think when a woman recite these. Poems they speak or say about their feeling and say their emotion. Most of these poems are about love to the lovely person, or woman's love to their children, or love to the environment. And sometimes they recite some poems about dramatically destination and ask from their lovely person as came back then. And for example, sometimes a woman recites some local poems and ask God to keep safe their children, and their children has a bright future. Or in some dry areas, a woman while weave a carpet ask God a rain. Um if you see my artistic video, in this video I put a short video, a woman with carpet, and there is some the local poems. In these local poems, he recite about dramatically destination and ask her lovely person came back and they see each other. I personally choose this poem because I think it has related to my personally life because me and my husband were far from each other about 2 years or no I'm far from my lovely mom and dad.
Yeah. Like all three of you, I want to cry because the stories are so beautiful that you've just told. And again, for those of you who are not familiar with the works, go on the Easter Edge website and have a look, and it will all make sense. Okay, I think we're doing okay for time. Okay, Charlotte, good? Good. Okay. So the next question is for each of you, there's an element of censorship in your work, that you are making work that you're not supposed to make. Nasim, your work speaks about women's sexuality, and that's a taboo subject in the culture that you come from. Nicole, your work refers back to your Indigenous culture that has been systematically suppressed. And Kevin, you're a man using processes and materials that are seen to belong to women. And all of you use symbolism in your work. And I wonder if that's a result of what you are doing and what you are talking about, and not being able to come out directly. Whose turn is it? Anyone? Nicole, come on.
A censorship. I could see a censorship, sort of a rebellion, but it's a subtle one. I mentioned earlier about pieces that I've created, and you wouldn't know that they were Indigenous pieces, except for if you understood. I don't have these earrings in now, but it's I've done them 3 or 4 times, and it's 4 double curves, and they make a diamond in the middle, and that I was told was a petroglyph. So the petroglyphs are carved into rocks. Of looking at it, it just looks like a beautiful symbol, and it's something there. It's dare I make the comparison almost to, how early Christians would write the fish in the sand, and it's almost like, well, I'm doing something you wouldn't know if it was Indigenous, or you wouldn't know if it was Mi'kmaq. You wouldn't know unless you were kind of familiar with it and say, oh, what a beautiful double curve. Obviously it must be Mi'kmaq or those types of things I think are very, very subtle. And I want it to be seen as beautiful and for exactly what it is. The fact of making those petroglyphs and hieroglyphs, and there are hieroglyphs that I want to do in upcoming works, and portray messages, and it's bringing back old styles of language itself. And it relates back to the exact question that you just asked about storytelling and language. And I mean, the hieroglyphs were originally the Mi'kmaq form of written language. So sometimes I don't know if it was actually carved into rock, but it was definitely, there were prayer books and prayers, Christian prayers, translated into hieroglyphs so that the people could read them. and pray in their own language. And it's so neat to see the translation between the hieroglyphs and the English translation, and you see the comparison. It means the same thing, but they replace certain words. So creator is, or God would have been translated to creator, and it's the way we refer to the creator. But bringing back those old styles and making them familiar again, and the revitalization of language, and language is in, the culture is entrenched in the language. The language is a verb-based language. I'm so fortunate to work with a coworker who is learning the language, and me, in my opinion, he would be a fluent speaker, but to hear it, and it to me, it's absolutely beautiful. And it's always a description of becoming black, becoming red. It's not this is, it's always a becoming of, it's in transition. It's never a static thing. So to make the old new again, it's you know, to make it familiar and visible, and it's not dead, and it never will be.
Nasim?
My artworks, most of my artworks inspired by women's struggles and their feelings, focusing on the pressure caused by social expectations of modern life, especially in some countries. Some years ago, when I started my drawings, I tried to show women's body. After sometimes I understood I couldn't show woman's body or woman's stuff directly, because the roles of women in some countries or some cultures are very traditional. In that time, I thought about gender discrimination and censorship, and why women hide their beauty, should hide their beauties or their bodies. And I understood a censorship is a way for, to magnify gender discrimination, and I can say my feel and what I thinking with some symbols. And the woman's mostly believing is the taboo subject in some cultures around the world, and I think it's related to censorship. And by sewing these traditional patterns into sanitary pads, I honor the sacred codes of women that are disguised in their visual and verbal poetries.
You've done it well. Okay, Kevin?
Okay, this was a tricky one for me. And when we originally talked about it, when we had our first meeting, you had used the term protest, and then you switched it to censorship. And I was thinking about protest and what sort of protest I might be doing in my artwork. And basically what it came down to is that, I am a heterosexual white cisgendered man. Is it really fair for me to be protesting about how things are for me working in textiles, because I get made fun of a little bit? And so I was, what any bit of protest that I'm doing is just sort of the idea that I want anybody of any gender to feel like they can do things like this and be comfortable with it, and be comfortable in their skin doing a thing that people might not associate with their skin. Um, and it's interesting because I work at a little quilt shop, East Coast Quilt Co. in St. John's, and a lot of times when people come in looking for fabrics, the first thing they'll say is, "I'm making a girl quilt, and can you help me pick out girl fabrics?" And I say, "Well, what's that girl into? Or like, I'm making a boy quilt. Do you have any Tonka fabrics? And I say, well, as a professional boy, I can say, like, I also like floral prints. So like maybe we can do a little bit more exploring in that. Um, and so I would say any amount of like protest is just that.
Yeah. Uh, I think that's important protest. I think in Newfoundland, you know, things are still pretty.
Yeah, I mean, nobody enforces gender roles like a Newfoundland man, honestly.
Exactly,
Like,
exactly. Well, Newfoundland women, um, and I just love how you are in the butcher shop and in the quilt shop, and like, what would the guys say if they saw the piece that you've just done? What
yeah,
would they turn on?
and like, yeah, I actually I do get made fun of at work at Sobeys. Like my
Everywhere you
boss
go.
will, yeah, my boss will make fun of me because
Yeah,
oh, what are you doing tonight? Knitting?
yeah,
Like, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
yeah. Okay. Charlotte, are there like, I can't see who else is here, and I just wonder, are there any other are there questions from the community? Are there questions in the chat room that we can open up?
No questions in the chat, but please, anyone, chime in anytime.
I've got to say, Kevin, that I really appreciate, like, even though you don't, like you said, it wasn't really a protest. I think putting yourself out there and even saying it and letting people know that you're doing this and making it a public thing, I think that is commendable. Because Shawn is absolutely right. I mean, I grew up in Newfoundland, but I moved away and lived away for 10 years. And to come back home, I almost felt like I was stepping back in time. And the opinions and the ideologies of gender roles within Newfoundland is still very staunchly rooted in the past. It is changing, but it is slowly changing. And normalizing things that people think are not normalizing, but questioning, what do girls like, what do boys like, like normalizing typical girl colors for boys and things that boys like for girls. I think that's perfect. My partner bakes bread and he gets tormented by people around here. He's not from Newfoundland, but he came home. I taught him to bake bread. He loves doing it. He bakes bread for the house. He's the main one. And he gets a little root in the ribs and he's like, hey, you're just jealous because you can't do it, you know? And it's normalizing those roles that they are interchangeable. Like, I like blues and blacks, and it's okay. It's okay for whatever. And I really commend that. And Nasim, I can only imagine I can, like, your artwork, especially with the pads, even here in Canada and Newfoundland, it is progressive for here. And it is a topic, like, I remember growing up and dropping a pad on the ground and being made fun of. And the fact that this natural process for our body, it shouldn't be a shameful thing. It is a beautiful thing. And then having the access to these items is actually a luxury that a lot of the world can't get access to. And that's something, I even think that's a hot topic here. And it is so brave. I'm like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, man, that really says something. You know, I love it.
Yeah, and like going off of like boy colors and girl colors for quilts, like a lot of times people are coming in and buying fabrics for a child's first blanket, like, you know, like a baby's first quilt. And so like right from like a week after they're born, they're already being put in the colors that their nan decides for them. And you know, it's a girl, it's going to be pink and flowers and unicorns and stuff. And yeah, the kid doesn't get any say. It just starts off that way.
Okay, anybody else have any questions, any comments you want to make? I had one more question, and this was one that Kevin says he loves to be asked. And I often will ask this at the end of an artist talk because I find the answer just says so much. But the question is, and I'll let Kevin go first, what are you reading now?
Well, I have read quite a few books since we first had our meeting. But what I am reading right now, I brought because I already knew that this was going to be a question. So I just started yesterday, All New Animal Acts by Don Mackay, his newest book, which is essays and poems, and it's absolutely incredible so far. There's a essay about lichen and an essay about the grotesque, and just poems scattered within that. And another book that I'm reading is called Love After the Ends, an anthology of two-spirit and indigiqueer speculative fiction, which is just absolutely fascinating. It's just short stories written by people who are living very different lives than me, and I just find it, I mean, I'm even just learning so much about pronouns from reading these stories. And yeah, I think it's incredible. I had a sick day, so I read a full, very short book today, which is right here. Most of What Follows Is True by Michael Crummy. Yeah, and it's a lecture that was turned into a book, and it's just sort of about the importance or the unimportance of describing Newfoundland landscapes with accuracy in writing, like whether or not that's important. And I think it's really interesting. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Each one of those, like knowing a little bit about your work now, I was able to say, oh yeah, that would feed that, or this would feed that, or oh, you'll learn, you know, and that's it doesn't matter whether it's fiction or nonfiction or poetry, or you choose a book for some reason. You go to a shelf, or you go to a bookstore, and something is telling you, choose this book, and it's all part of your creative process. And I think that's fascinating. That's why I love this question. Nasim?
I think these days I'm so busy because I have some commissions and I shoot on them and be on time. But during the day, I try to watch a film, and most of the time I find them from Netflix. The Friends is very, very favorite for me because it's so funny and help me to learn English, help me in my speaking and my listening. And most of the time I try to listen podcasts, especially some Persian podcasts. And I have a plan to study some articles or essays that students study them in university, because I want to apply for MFA, and I love increase my information about international and modern art.
Excellent, excellent. I hope you're applying here. Get you out to the West Coast. Nicole?
So I commute an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. So I'm a big podcast and audiobook fan. I have finished up recently One Drum by Richard Wagamis, I believe, and then Sacred Instructions by Sherry Mitchell. Those, it's too bad. I was really, really enjoying One Drum, but the author had passed away during the writing of it, so it wasn't finished, and you can tell it ended so abruptly. A couple of TV shows that I've been watching. I'm looking forward. I haven't started it yet, this season of The Handmaid's Tale. And then The Stand by the Stephen King TV adaptation.
That's quite a variety.
Yeah.
But it's kind of what our lives are like these days, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, Charlotte?
Shawn, what are you reading?
I didn't prepare this. I am
Or watching.
I'm reading Overstory, and there's a woman a textile artist who lives in Nova Scotia, who was originally from South Africa. I follow her online, and she recommended it, and just recommended it so strongly. And I tried a lot of the books that I read. I do get online from the library, but the problem there is that you only have 2 weeks. And I knew this was a thick book, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to buy this. And I was in St. John's last week, and I went to Chapters and bought this. And it is thick, and it's kind of seems like short stories, but I think by the end, all of the characters reappear again. But each story is somehow connected to a tree. And more I am thinking about trees. I lost a beautiful tree this winter because the city made a mistake and cut it down. And I planted a tree yesterday, and it's only tiny, but it's the beginning. But more and more my thoughts are about trees. So I don't know, I'm heading into finishing a project I've been working on for 2 years. And somehow I think what's coming up has to do with trees, and I have no idea why, but I know that's why I had to have this book.
Have you read Braiding Sweetgrass?
I've got it, and I have not read it yet. Yes. Yeah.
Her connection with trees might explain a lot.
Yeah.
I have a book recommendation.
Okay.
For probably everyone. It's called The New Politics of the Handmaid, Craft, Art, and Design by Anthea Black and Nicole Burrish. And it's a book of essays by like a super diverse array of artists, and it talks about craft, art, and design through the intersections of like race, gender, class, climate change, and it's really great. They talk about beading, they talk about embroidery. There's a really good chapter that's like a direct response to Rosika Parker's The Subversive Stitch. I don't know if anyone's read that, but in that chapter they talk, the artist talks about embroidery specifically, and its importance in like historic cultures, looking at embroidery traditions in Mexico, Chile, and Canadian Indigenous communities. And it's like a really good book. I would recommend it.
Who's the author?
Yeah.
I'll type it in the chat actually, and then you'll just have it written down.
I'm definitely gonna go back to this video and like
Get the book recs.
done searching.
Hey, Sean, I was wondering who the artist is who recommended Overstory, the textile artist in Nova
Her
Scotia.
name is Valerie Herder.
I think I've heard that name before.
Hearder. I know that she used to, pre-COVID, conduct textile tours in South Africa. And I always wish that I had $20,000 or however much to go on one, because I think it would have been amazing. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Awesome. Well, unless anyone has any more questions, or if anyone else wants to share what they're reading, because that I'm gonna keep that one in my toolbox. It's such a good question.
Yeah, my professor would always ask that at the end of our fourth year critiques. That would always be the last question, is just, what are you reading right now?
Charlotte, what are you reading?
I'm in the middle of a book. I'm a very slow reader. Unfortunately, I'm dyslexic, so I can only bite off little pieces at a time. But I'm reading a Midgley book called Science and Poetry. I really love what she's getting at. I really love how she writes philosophy, because it's so easy. Well, it's digestible. Like, the ideas are big, but the words are accessible. I'm also watching all of Drag Race right now. I've never watched Drag Race before, and then when lockdown happened, I was like, all right, season 1, wait, never mind, season 2, because I can't stand the quality of the camera on season 1, but I'm on season 11 now. And so I went through all those in like 3 months. It's been a ride.
It's funny, the associations you're going to have with the pandemic.
I know, right? Yeah, Tiger King, Drag Race. Also would recommend Snowpiercer, one of my favorite shows on Netflix. Yeah, it's like this. It's based on a French comic book that most people know the movie, but I don't know anything about the movie. But the show is like about basically this. It's a revolution on a train, and it's the end of the world, and there's a revolution, and I hope I didn't.
What is it called again?
Snowpiercer.
Okay.
They're on a train. It's the end of the world. Close quarters. Tensions are high. Resources are low. Yeah. Some class tensions. Thanks for asking.
Anyone else want to jump in with their books or what they're watching?
I just finished watching, have you guys heard the show High Fidelity? It's
No.
like, it's super cool, but I finished watching it today and then realized like that it's only 1 season and it's been canceled.
Oh.
I was so devastated because I loved it. Lenny Kravitz's daughter, Zoe Kravitz, is like the main character, and she's like one of my all-time, like she's just like so cool. So that's the reason why I went to it. And then like it has a lot of really cool like kind of like filming aspects, like they break the fourth wall a lot. They kind of like end each episode and she's like, maybe she's somewhere different, but she's like always doing the same thing, which is like really cool because it like it's kind of like full circle. So like just even like those little elements are kind of fun. And I'm like kind of not reading right now, but I went up and got my book just in case someone asked. But I live with Charlotte and her partner Alex, and he is a professional, like he's a professional reader basically. And he's into fantasy, and like Charlotte, you can totally explain that, whatever he's into, better than I can. But anyways, I wanted a fantasy book because I'm always like, I haven't read I haven't read a fiction in a while, so he recommended The Lies of Loch Lamora to me. So it's like this really cool, I'm only a little ways through, but yeah, I'm reading fiction and it's like really fun and like kind of magical, mischievous. Yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Love that. Yeah, he's really resourceful. He's just like, come look at my library. Like, let me make some recommendations. Awesome. Thanks for that question. That was so fun. I just want to thank everyone for coming. I love these things. I can't wait to do it again. I can't wait to keep in touch with all you folks. This is officially like the last FARR event, but it won't be the last of hearing from you. I hope that we can all be in the same room together. I'd just love to talk to all you some more. And the FARR program will be continuing, so please tell your friends. And yeah, I hope to see you guys again in person
Thank
or
you so much. Yeah.
and
Bye,
If I come
guys.
out, if I come out to St. John's, I'll let you know.
please do. Awesome. Okay, bye. Thank you, Shawn. You were so great.
Okay. Take care.
And Melissa.
Thank you. Take care.